So I haven't done a diagram video for some time, and I feel like I get more information across, hopefully, although the diagrams aren't very clear and they're very messy and such. So I'm giving this diagram more as a means for me to give quicker explanation, and hopefully that it helps in that sense. So I'm using this fractal integral thing that I was talking about before. So if you haven't watched those videos or don't understand what I mean by it, I would recommend going back to those videos. I'm saying that we start sort of as these are gestures in the fractal sense. We start sort of in a primary I, then we move to a we, then we move to an it, and then to an its. Although all of these are always arising, they're always there. And then after those are sort of went through, then we stand back and we can kind of witness that, and then we go and search for a new system, kind of pluralizing the old, going to a new in a certain regard. And so I'm saying that this kind of happens in a fractal fashion in all stages of development, perhaps. And there would be, in this theory, there's ways to break things down in 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. I'm saying that this is one method that I think is fairly integral, and it captures a whole dynamic system of different interacting systems. Cross-paradigmatic, but even perhaps more than that. Mandalic cross-paradigmatic or something is what I'm kind of looking at here. I've changed this part of it a little bit, and this part of it means how the fractal might be broken up, just a little bit. And I'm suggesting that the first major fractal is perhaps best explained in and through like the periodic table of elements. And I'd like chemists, if they have some time, to check that out, maybe give some feedback. I don't know if there's any chemistry, degree people watching this or anything, but so the first major tier I'm calling kind of the physical Brown stages, and here we go back and forth between charges, and so perhaps one of the major 6 of those major listings of the periodic elements, across 8, roughly, and then in the middle it stretches out. You could probably break them down into roughly 6, and then there's, in all of these, I think that there's the most fleshiness in the center, and so you get sort of an expanded map in the middle, and then it kind of goes narrower at the end. There's a reason for that, but I won't probably get too much into that in this video. Anyway, so it's charges 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going back and forth between negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. Now, each fractal adds something new, and that something new is, in a certain sense, you're taking this is what this kind of represents. The periodic table is actually, in a fractal sense, just representative of 1, the first stage. And then it takes 1 as sort of its base, or the object, for the next tier. So then the next tier's focus kind of becomes here. And so if you think about it this way, this whole system kind of represents the physical in a certain regard. In a certain sense, not totally. This whole system sort of represents emotional. And then so you have this whole, the periodic table of elements is sort of laid down, and then you can have sort of life come out from it in a certain regard. And when I say that too, you have to get things like the sun, planetary objects and stuff involved in that. So perhaps you can't fully squish it down to just, just the periodic table of elements. You also kind of have to include, perhaps in it, the more complex makeups of the bonding systems. And then, but that might all be included in here, you might argue. Depends on your perspective a little bit. The one way to check for this, if this whole theory is right, is you look at time. There's going to be a pattern in this temporally, in the sense that, roughly speaking, probably 1/8 of the time it took for the last system to be developed is the time it will take for the next. So you can look at the time of this, and then you can kind of predict through time where these next ones are going to go. That's sort of the time wave zero theory. And when you get these stacked correctly, in a very, when you get a very good vision of all these stackings, then your predictive ability to see into the future, in my opinion, is going to be higher and greater. And so once this is laid down, then you can kind of get into early life. So I'm saying sort of the first sort of signs of life are sort of these single-celled organisms. Sort of, it has that agentic component, or the plus or the -1 kind of, which is represented physical. So it's -1 survival agentic kind of thing. And then the next one is sort of the expression of what this whole thing is going to be. It's sort of a bonding or communicative sort of, there's this astral energy, I think, that kind of is really associated with all of these stages, but very expressive in this one. So you get the multicellular organisms, there's a bonding or communicative aspect, so +2. And then you might get something like plants, perhaps, and, I don't know if that's the best expression, but something like that, perhaps. It's dominant, it's agentic, and, so something like that. I've heard Aurobindo suggest that that's the first time he sees this psychic. I don't know. And then here you get fish, and there's sort of this communicative part of it, faithful, although they eat one another. So it's still very out for yourself in a certain sense, very the primitive sides of this is all kind of more in that. And so really all of the physicals, just looking at that, all of the life is sort of down here in a certain regard. Maybe this is kind of what I'm theorizing now. It's just a different take on it. And again, within all of these, there's subfractals of everything, so it's hard to really express cleanly. And then up here, I'm suggesting maybe reptiles. And then before, I was giving that whole breakup of mammals because there's so much that goes on here. And I'm just going to say that it's the top, or the green sort of system of the subjective. And so, at the very top of it, you get something like elephants. But then perhaps as you go a step down, you get dogs are kind of expression of 4, more or less. Maybe moles or something are down here, and badgers maybe here, something like that. So the whole expression of mammals, I'm kind of suggesting, might be right there. And then you get some of the higher mammals, such as apes and dolphins, down here, which is sort of agentic, but now we're in the proper spiral dynamic system of 6 on 6. So here we get beige, and you do see, in a certain sense, really... but these beings have to have something akin to a neocortex, in my opinion. And so here we're actually stepping up into the it. And the first time we can actually objectify reality. With purple, you're getting, the charge is with a we, but the focus again is in the it. So you have, the magical kind of thinking kind of coming online maybe 50, 70,000 years ago, something like that. Again, there's a spectrum of that, so that the real charge might have been 50,000, although it might have sparked around 70,000 with kind of a more beige focus. And then you get the agentic red, I'd say probably starting in its early form, in its sort of beige form, in again, these are just gestures, I don't really have a good expression, so it's properly kind of developed around 10,000 years ago, it seems like. And then you get the more absolutistic blue, starting around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, probably. And then you get the more agentic orange, which is an expression, a certain sense of being able to witness the map, but in the Platonic sense, this one isn't really activated, there's no real knowledge of it, so you often talked about the big three, so that, holding the map as an object, and then you kind of get the more communicative or pluralizing, looking for something different, which is really seen, arguably, starting about 200 years ago, but coming online as a culture about 50 years ago. And now this is the thing that, our center of gravity, no place in sort of our communities do we have a place where we can kind of live our whole day-to-day existence in yellow. But that seems to be what's maybe just starting very soon, pretty much now, where, as I've been noting that there's an additional thing here, this is just that in a certain sense, although it does have its fractal. This is just that, although it's, again, that plus that in a fairly real sense. And this thing is mostly focused on this it, right? So the agentic red is, or this whole column of the spiral dynamic system is sort of mostly focused on that. And then this one, I think, is mostly focused on it. So I'm considering these more the integrative stages, or the soul stages, soul integral stages, perhaps. And I've added here now the -1 plus the agentic plus the kind of beige, which is a fractal of yellow, and then I have earth. So, I'm adding all of these, 1 plus 1 plus 1, and then you get the new system, which is, the soul is focused here, I'd say, on earth in a certain regard, which is sort of grounding, which is so the energy of the earth in a certain regard. Whereas this one, so +2, it has sort of a charge with water, sort of the expanding out, that emotive sense, because this has a strong connection with the emotive. See, down here are more commutative, here are more agentic, this is more interior, this is more exterior. So again, we're on the exterior of the commutative side of things here. So there is a tendency, I'd say, to make maps, but this is the more emotional kind of integrative map-making domain. So water is sort of the soul expression in a certain sense here. Now, with coral, I'm suggesting it's a fractal of it, or sort of fire, which this whole sort of it fractal kind of is. This whole, it's sort of fiery, independent, the creation of an independent thinker, sort of that major 3 stage. And then when you get to 4, it's kind of the fourth system. It's the first time in the soul stages, I think, that it gets to really represent itself. So it's in that proper sense. I'm calling it air, where, it's a properly integrative mind that is an inter-mind, I think. The first time it really gets to understand what this whole system is about. See, humans didn't really get to understand what they were doing in a certain regard until they hit red, because in my opinion, red is the sort of fractal of the spiral dynamics first tier, what they call first tier. And so, that's when you really start to see, technology boom, proper objectivity come online, sort of real writing systems and mathematics, these sorts of things really start to come online there. And so this whole thing has a kind of power slave mentality to it, kind of creative, but also the other side of it is this power orientation, whereas this one has more of a using our tools to integrate in a more commutative sense. And so you can expect up here with what will be the 5th stage in this quote-unquote 4th tier, which is the 2nd tier in spiral dynamics, you're going to get sort of an objectification of this whole 4 and 4 system. And so, to do that, you're going to need a lot of tools. You'll really need the intermind to be activated to really make sense of it in a fairly real way. And then that one will be, again, a reflection of the green, commutative, pluralizing of all these different maps that are similar in some sense, maybe to something like this, but it would pluralize them and have them available and open. And so, in a certain way, this is a closed system, but in another sense it's not, because this can trail off infinitely that way and infinitely this way. The strange thing is, the closer you get to the end, the more kind of confusion it is. It seems like this one has a lot of confusion. These middle stages are more in the heart of it, the meat of it, so there's more grounding. So we're kind of moving into the higher end of the middle of these major stages in some sense. I don't know how much sense that made, but I hope it was interesting. Be well.